Hey guys, welcome to Star Wars Timeline. Today's character highlight is about Saba Sebatyne. This video will be broken into several sections. First, we'll look at the general story synopsis of this character, then I'll discuss her personality traits as well as her Jedi powers. At the end, I'll tell you my personal impression of this character and what I hope to see in the future. As always guys, thank you so much for supporting my channel. Please like this video, sub to the channel, drop your comments in the video section below, let me know what was your favorite part. Anyway, let's dive right into it. So, Saba Sebatyne is a part of this cold-blooded lizard species called Barabel, and she's a Jedi Master. She first appears in a series of books called The New Jedi Order. This was book 9 called Star by Star, and it was written by Troy Denning, released in October of 2001. Now let me just give you a very brief setting so you understand what's going on here. So The New Jedi Order was an epic 19-book series which marked the events after the original films, the original trilogy, so it's between the years of 21 and 25 after the Battle of Yavin or after Episode 4. And it's the general gist of the story is where it's Luke Skywalker in full swing. He's restoring the Jedi Knights and he's adapting this new mentality how the Jedi should move into the future. And it's at the same time during the New Jedi Order when these new intergalactic invaders, the Yuzong Vong, take over. And this is basically the entire series of 19 books handle that major conflict. Saba is discovered at an early age by Master Elysia. She was a human as far as I remember, and she was also Luke Skywalker's pupil. She herself was born after the destruction of the evil empire after Emperor Palpatine was vanquished, and she studied with Luke Skywalker on Yavin 4, eventually becoming a Jedi Knight as well as Jedi Master. And she discovered Saba Sebatyne when she was very young at an early age on her home world of Barab 1. This is where these lizards, Barabels, live. And we have to mark one thing here right away, that Barabels naturally a very aggressive species, this hunter-gatherer society, and it's kind of unlikely, but at the same time very interesting when the Jedi Knights are pulled from their rank. So eventually, Saba Sebatyne becomes a Jedi Knight, and she forms this group called the Wild Knights, which are basically Force-sensitive squadron, which includes actually her son Tessar, who is another Barabel, as well as other Barabels called Doherty and Zal, another human scientist, Dedani Q, who joins the team briefly, and other members. We understand that Saba Sebatyne played a key role during this Yuzong Vong war during the New Jedi Order. When the Vong invaded her homeworld and she saw the complete devastation, how they just completely wrecked her planet, she saw one Yuzong Vong ship still in orbit. And she decides to attack. She strikes in vengeance without realizing that it was actually a slave ship carrying the last of her people. So you can imagine her absolute tragedy and the loss, and she feels this great sense of personal guilt that she was trying to go and avenge her own people, but in the end, she destroys thousands and thousands surviving members of her species. So from this point forward, it's a very dark time for Saba. She's hell-bent on vengeance, and she attacks Yuzong Vong whenever possible, viciously trying to avenge her people. But eventually, Luke Skywalker sees her personal turmoil, and he invites her to this expedition to find a sentient planet called Zenoma Sicard, which is actually, there's a one expanded universe novel relegated just to that one planet. And on her journey, Saba Sebatyne, because of her personal trauma, but also because of being exposed to this new planet, she unlocks this extra potential inside her, an ability to sense the Force in a way that very few Jedi ever could. And she reconnects with the Force, she finds her redemption, she finds her inner peace, and she learns to grieve for her own people, even though that's a very alien sensibility for her species. She senses the life all around her, and she kind of like can sense the passing spirits of her members. Later on, she becomes a Jedi Grand Master. That's after the war with the Yuzong Vong. And she also becomes involved heavily in other major conflicts, like the Dark Nest Crisis, which is another trilogy of books which I highly recommend to all of you guys, where they confront this other insectoid species, the Killiks, which leads to a whole new great all-out war called the Swarm War. And during that time, Saba Sebatyne often travels with both Skywalker's and Solo's families, which results in a very interesting development. She becomes the mentor of Leia Organa Solo. She actually starts training her. But before that time, if memory serves, and you guys who are more recent on reading your expanded universe, you can refresh my memory because it's been years since I read all of these books. But up to this point, Leia kind of dabbles in the Force. She kind of gets a couple of hints and tricks from Luke Skywalker, but she doesn't become a fully fledged trainee. She doesn't fully dedicate herself to the Force up to this point where Saba Sebatyne becomes her full master, and she travels with Saba for, I think, in a period of over 1 year. And so at the end of this Swarm War, Leia also becomes a Jedi Knight, and Saba Sebatyne suggests that she makes her own lightsaber because she's able to graduate to that new point. Let's briefly now talk about, there's a lot more to Saba Sebatyne, which I'm not going to go into it. I just wanted to give you guys a general idea what this character is like. Now let's talk a little bit about Saba's personality as well as her Jedi powers. We know, as I mentioned earlier, that she is a part of this cold-blooded bipedal alien species called the Barabal lizards. And they're very aggressive, as I mentioned earlier, and they make excellent soldiers, mercenaries, and like very militant kind of species. And it was a very interesting contrast out of this kind of people, which is not uncommon. It also happens with other species. Saba Sebatyne becomes this Grand Jedi Master who plays one of the most key roles in the Order. When a tragedy happens to her people, in the beginning, Saba Sebatyne is unable to relate the very human emotion of grief and grieving her for people and trying to sort out her emotions. But at the same time, she still feels very devastated when it happens to her own homeworld. So I felt it was a very interesting, unique contradiction there for her character. It's also very interesting when you read a character from a perspective of a different alien species who is unlike humans, who behaves in a different ways. And I'm going to return to this point actually later on. Also, she held very special beliefs. She thought that the Jedi should live in the moment. They should always open themselves up and listen to the Force and trust in their own instincts. This is kind of due to the fact that she comes from Barabal species and they're great hunters. They always have to rely on minute-to-minute understanding of their surroundings and their environment. She also shared a very odd and different sense of humor with her son and other Barabals of this Wild Knights group, which is not understood by human species. When you read it in actual novels, it sounds really corny and very dry, and it's not supposed to be funny, but it's funny to them. So it's a very whimsical and cool moments in the books when Barabals joke with one another. And another humorous thing about this character that I found was that she found Leia's need for organization infuriating. This is not how the Barabal's mind or her Jedi Force abilities work. She always tells her, be here, be in the moment, be present, don't jump ahead of time. But because Leia was heavily involved, obviously, with politics and the new Jedi Order, and then later she becomes a Jedi, because she had 3 kids, she needed to formulate her plans and organize her day, and it's not something that jived with her master. So it was a very interesting kind of like cool bickering between the two. Now let's talk a little bit about her Jedi powers and abilities. We knew, as I mentioned earlier, that Saba Sebatyne became especially attuned to the Force in a way that very few other Jedi Master ever could. And she, at one point, maybe I should have a spoiler warning on right here. There's major spoiler in the story here involving the Skywalker family. So if you don't want to find out what this is, please skip forward just a minute forward or so, so you don't hear about this. But anyway, at one point, Saba starts realizing that things are not as they should be with Leia and Han Solo's eldest son, Jacen Solo. Because he, during this terrible Yuzang Vong War with these intergalactic invaders, he falls into their hands and he's tortured by this creature. Anyway, he slowly begins to his downfall to the dark side. And even though he has this facade, and he tricks even Luke Skywalker believing that he's just a different sort of Jedi who tries to think outside the box, in reality, he's descending and he's becoming this new Sith Lord. And Saba Sebatyne is the first one who identifies, who sees that darkness in him. And Jacen actually recoils. He fears her because her Jedi abilities are so strong, and she's such a skilled and powerful fighter that not even Jason dares to confront her directly. She's like, oh, I better stay away. She's too powerful for me. If she finds out to the full extent what I am, I'm in trouble. We also understand that she's a skilled fighter, but she is also exceptional at telekinesis. She could move things just with a thought of her mind. She didn't need to do any kind of special hand gestures, which we often see in the films. She also has another ability called the Force Valor, which is, it's not the capacity to heal, but it's the capacity to bolden your resolve and strengthen your body physically when you sustain severe injuries and you continue to fight. So a lot of her opponents were completely shocked when Saba Sebatyne would stay in battle, heavily wounded, and can carry on with the fighting. She also mastered healing trance, which is, after all the battling is done, the Jedi goes basically in this hibernation. They put their body to sleep, which allows them to rejuvenate faster. Now, it's not a magical ability which will completely heal you overnight, but it helps your body to heal and adjust to your wounds much quicker. Another ability that Saba has is the Force Meld, is where you're able to attune yourself to the surrounding and to your compatriots, to other Jedi that you fight side by side with, that you completely master and coordinate and anticipate each other's moves. Finally, what I wanted to mention is that Saba Sebatyne excelled at this Jarkai technique, which involves handling two lightsabers at the same time. Now, I'm not exactly sure if that's the technique that Anakin Skywalker uses in Attack of the Clones. Maybe it's something worth checking out for me personally, because, guys, just like yourselves, I'm learning about Star Wars lore every day. I've been reading these expanded universe books for over 20 years, and I'm still discovering things every single day. So this technique that we see Anakin use could possibly be Jarkai. And at one point, Saba spars with another great Jedi Master and Luke's closest ally, Corran Horn, and she's able to hold her own. So what was my impression of Saba Sebatyne when I was reading her during the New Jedi Order books? What was my impression overall? First and foremost, it is always cool to discover a new bipedal lizard-like species. I always find those intriguing. That's always cool, especially when they're able to talk. They have like a different speech pattern, or in case of Saba species, Barabels, they have a very interesting way how they joke about things or how they cope with grief and loss. It was kind of interesting and exciting for me. And I really enjoyed her emotional connection to her son and other Barabels. That's always an interesting, one of the greater themes in Star Wars has always been family, and that's what this character greatly represents. Another thing that I wanted to point out here is that I appreciated the fact that she was a female, and not just a female, but an alien female, because it helped me to get inside of her perspective and understand what she's like, without just instantly saying, oh, she's a woman. It's such a great thing that involved her in the book. Because, I personally believe that any person first should earn their right in the fans' audience's hearts through merit. I don't care if you're a male or a female character, having a specific gender is not an accolade. It's not an accomplishment or an achievement. We're either born a male or a female. And what I like here, Troy Denning was able to separate her in a way from the familiar human females that I as a male identify with, and it makes me appreciate her as a woman of her own species and her own accomplishments, and seeing through the veil of just, she's a woman, and probably the authors are putting her there just to even the odds and show as many female characters as the male character. It's not that. She's not just put in this new book series just to say, we need another female. No. She's completely has like self-autonomy. She has complete merit, and she accomplishes so many great deeds there that you respect her as a woman, as somebody who's of a different species, but mostly because of her actions, how she relates to other people. There's such an emotional resonance with this character. Guys, I gotta tell you, she's one of my all-time favorite female characters in of all Star Wars. Because of the story that she's in, because of the characters that she interacts with, because this training with Leia, the special bonds that she forms with Solo family and Skywalker family, because all of those things. And it ends up being cool that she's also a female. She's just as capable as anyone else in this universe. Anyway, guys, I think that's all I wanted to say about this character. Oh yes, that's one final thing is, What do I hope to see in the future as far as Saba Sebatyne is concerned? Well, most likely we're not gonna get her specifically because she mostly was popular through a medium of books, which are arguably lesser interacted with by fans than like an animated or feature film or an animated show. So I think it would be probably more reasonable to hope to see just the bearable species in the future. Actually, I would like to see them in the High Republic books because we see this point where it's the zenith of the Republic and the Jedi Order is its absolute full height. So I want to see more interesting and different species there. This would be an excellent entry to introduce some bearables in there. We have one Trandoshan Jedi Master there, right? But it will be also interesting to see the bearables. Another thing that I would like to see is possibly a quick mention of Saba Sebatyne as one of the Jedi members when Luke Skywalker completely reforges the new Jedi Order, which is alluded to in Star Wars sequels. You know, he rebuilds the temple, he has a whole slew of different trainees before obviously Kylo Ren comes in and destroys it all. Maybe there's a quick mention of a Jedi Master called Saba Sebatyne who is training other of Luke's students. That's a possibility there. And one last thing I'd like to mention is, hey, maybe we could have another non-canonical TV show or a book maybe that would actually write one of the Star Wars Visions episodes, The Duel, was converted into a full non-canonical book. Maybe the same thing could happen and we could see introduction of bearables and Saba Sebatyne would be this powerful two lightsaber wielding Jedi Master in it. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this character highlight. If you're familiar with the new Jedi Order, please let me know what were your thoughts of Saba Sebatyne, her squadron, how they are joked with one another, and how are they able to confront the Yuuzhan Vong. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.